This is a very, very kind of authentic recipe in the sense that it's a recipe that I was taught when working with roasting chefs in Hong Kong. So let's run through the general ingredients. Number one is pork neck. So this is a piece of pork neck. You can get your butcher to give it to you. It's probably a little bit more difficult to get from the supermarket, but any good butcher will be able to get hold of this for you. This one is a piece of Iberico pork neck, kindly delivered to us from a company called Three Down Foods, who you can order it directly from. It's really nice because it's got a little bit of additional marbling inside the meat, which will make all the difference to the end product. If we run through the other ingredients, so we have some soy sauce. This is light soy sauce. So people obviously, sometimes they get confused. There's a very, very big difference between light soy sauce and dark soy sauce. So light soy sauce is for seasoning, whereas dark soy sauce is pretty much purely for color. It has more of a bitter taste to it, dark soy sauce. It's more viscous, and we very, very rarely use it for actual seasoning. Moving on, we have a bit of baking powder. This might seem like a bit of an odd ingredient to be putting into a barbecued meat recipe. But baking powder has a very special property, and we use it a lot in the Chinese kitchen because basically it's an alkaline powder. So basically it works as a tenderizer. So a piece of pork neck, for example, traditionally you very rarely roast it, you'd probably braise it. But because we're adding baking powder to it, we manage to keep the fat that's inside the neck naturally. At the same time, we still get a very, very kind of soft texture to the meat as an end product. Further on, we have some corn flour, some salt, some sesame oil, some garlic powder, some star anise powder, and I'll run through a few stranger ingredients. One is rose wine. So normally when I write this on recipes, people think I'm writing rosé wine. It's not rosé wine, it's rose wine. This is what I'm referring to. You can pick it up from a Chinese supermarket. And sometimes you do get chefs who say, you know, if you can't get hold of it, go use an alternative. Everyone seems to just say, if you can't get hold of Chinese rice wine, use a dry sherry. But actually, in the world that we live in now, go make the effort. Go to a Chinese supermarket, order it online, because it does make all the difference. I can't emphasize things like this rose wine, for example. It really makes a very, very big difference to the end, because you can taste and you can smell the aroma of the rose wine when you've added it. Another ingredient here is something called juhao sauce. So juhao sauce is a soya bean based product. It comes like this. And again, with a lot of Chinese cooking, a lot of Cantonese cooking, don't cast doubt when using things out of a jar. You know, some of these stuff, they're fermented products, they're salted products. You can't make them yourself at home. You know, in a restaurant, you know, we probably use maybe 30 or 40 different fermented products. If we were to try and ferment all of them by ourselves, you know, my entire restaurant would be filled with vats of fermented products, and there'll be no space for guests. And the other thing you have to remember is actually the people who make this stuff, they've been making it for over 100 years sometimes. You know, black beans, for example, fermented black beans. The very first record of using fermented black beans was in 200 BC. So, you know, from 200 BC to now, chefs have been using fermented black beans. There's very little chance that you're going to be able to ferment them better than the people who are experts in it. I have a question. What else can we use this rose wine for? So what else can we use this rose wine for? You can use it for all barbecued meat. You can use it in some desserts. You can use it. I wouldn't cook it because it's got a slightly higher alcohol content, and actually the aroma is very, very strong. So roast meat is what it's most classically used for. And then that's all our ingredients. And the last thing is this. So this is red powder. You got two options of a way to get red colouring into your char siu. Number one, you can use dried rice yeast, which is this. So if you grind this up, this will give you a red color, which you can add to your Char Siu mix. Or, you know, if you really want to, you can use a little bit of coloring. Again, I'm not telling you to put in a mass amount of coloring into it to the point where it might be unhealthy. We're talking about a very, very small amount. Yes, a question? Questions? Okay, go ahead. So we've got one question saying, can we use beef instead? For this particular recipe, I probably wouldn't use beef. I would stick to pork or chicken, really, because the flavour just works a little bit better. I think with pork especially, and with beef especially, because the cooking process that you'll see in a minute, it's a little bit longer. You'll end up using a piece of steak and you'll end up cooking it all the way through to well done. And it will pretty much ruin that piece of beef, I think. Anyway, let's get started. We've gone through all the ingredients. So now we have a piece of pork neck. There are two things I'm going to do to this first. And most of them, the objective of them is number one, to tenderize. And number two, to get the marinade to get into it as quickly as possible. So by batting this out, we are actually tenderizing the meat. Some people might put a piece of cling film over the top first. We've had out a lot of meat. And then secondly, I'm going to use this tool. So this tool is traditionally used by roasting chefs. More traditionally used actually for crispy pork belly. So when in some recipes you see chefs scoring pork belly, in Cantonese kitchens we use this. So basically instead of scoring the skin, we put loads of holes into the skin. And it ends up giving you a much superior product. One where the skin isn't as hard and it's more biscuity in texture, which is what you get when you get Cantonese roast pork. We post the recipe for you, definitely, so that you can try this afterwards. So with this piece of equipment, I'm going to just stab the pork all over. And what this does is basically just allows for the marinade to go into the meat a little bit more quickly. And also what it does is that it tenderizes the meat. You know, these are those kind of like small, finer details, which sometimes people just miss out. They might just get a bit of pork neck and just throw it into the marinade. It's the small things, and a lot of Chinese cooking is about those small details. Okay, so that's the meat done. So now what we're going to do, we're going to start mixing in all the ingredients for the marinade. So these have all been measured out according to the recipe which was published. Not a problem if you don't have it. We'll add it later. So right in here, the corn flour, the salt, the rose wine, the red rice yeast, some sesame oil. Again, if you don't want to use sesame oil, you can just use vegetable oil. Star anise powder, which is basically just star anise ground up into a powder, or you can buy it from a Chinese supermarket already in a powder. Garlic powder, you can get that, I think, in supermarkets, regular supermarket, if not Chinatown, or if not, a lot of Indian or Asian supermarkets will have it because they use it a lot in Indian cooking. some sugar, and then water. And what I can advise you now is that when you mix this together, at the end of the day, no meat has gone into here. So just taste it, especially if you can't get hold of certain ingredients. Taste the marinade so that you know what you can add or what you can compensate. You know, for example, if you don't have the rose wine, it's not a problem. So just taste the marinade. Whatever you add, maybe you want to add some cognac to it. Maybe you want to add some, as you said, maybe if you really want to make yourself happy by adding some kind of alcohol to it, add your dried cherry to it. I would personally probably add cognac to it instead, because it has a much stronger aroma which you need for this dish. So I've added water there, and I've also added some sugar. So what you're tasting for really is the sugar level. So here I'm going to add a little bit extra sugar. Okay, we got a question. Okay, I have the question just come in saying, how long should you punch the meat for? Until you're happy. The most important thing is to break down the meat, to make it soft, and you don't want it to be too thick. So if your butcher cuts you a piece of pork neck about an inch thick, it's going to take a long time for the marinade to go in. I would recommend that you bat it out so it's until about a centimeter thick. Okay, so mix the ingredients together. Again, this marinade, I prefer it to be a little bit sweeter than a lot of marinades, only because when the sugar goes into this particular meat, it gives it a kind of a cured ham texture. Now again, with Char Siu, different roasting chefs have different preferences. Some of them like it like a piece of roasted, like a steak. You know, they like it kind of soft, really juicy. Other people, and myself included in this, I actually prefer my Char Siu to have a kind of half ham, half steak texture. So by the time it's cooked and it's cured with all the sugar, and I'm going to show you the after cooking marinade, I want it to have a kind of hammy gloss to the meat. So we're going to add the meat in. I'm making good progress here. It's only been 14 minutes so far. So we added the pork into the marinade. And don't be shy, you know, you can squeeze it, you can touch it, you know. But at this point, I would not recommend you retasting the marinade because your pork has been in now. Yeah, if you're going to taste your marinade, do it before you add any raw meat into it. Put it in. So if you're a super high-tech kitchen, what you can do is you can stick it into a vac bag and you can suck the air out, and that will accelerate the marination process. If not, not a problem. Just get your bowl like so, wrap it up in cling film, leave it in your fridge for a day. I would probably leave it for at least a day in your fridge, sometimes even 2 days. Just to really let those flavors go into the meat. And there really is there's no shortcut to this, apart from the vac packing. You really need to give the meat time to go in. So this one has been curing for 2 days. As you can see from the meat now, it's gone red in color from the yeast, and all those flavors should have gone in by now. Okay, we have a question. Okay, so we have another question then. How long do you leave it if it's been vac packed? You know what? It doesn't really matter. Like, you know, you could leave it for half a day as an absolute minimum, whereas in the fridge a day. But again, I would leave it for a day. Give it enough time to really let those flavors go in. Okay, so this is your marinated pork that we are going to cook now. So we've got our cooker here. Not a cooker I use very much in a restaurant, I'm not going to lie. So normally we have woks like that. Obviously you guys do not have a wok at home, or a fire that high. You probably do have a wok, probably one of Ken Hom's, good choice, and probably collecting dust in the back of your cupboard. But the thing about cooking with a wok here is because of the flame. Now that flame gets to about 900 degrees, which your domestic cooker will never get that hot. And so we'll just work around it. We're just going to use an induction cooker here. We've got another question. How many steaks can you make with this sauce? I think with all marinades, you need to have enough liquid to be able to really cover the meat. For this particular marinade, the recipe, I probably wouldn't put more than maybe two 200-gram pork neck steaks inside. Because after that, you're going to begin to lose some color. Lose flavor. So the important thing here is that you really want to get the barbecued. You want to get that simulation of barbecue. So obviously, traditionally, what we would do with this is that we would hang it into a duck oven. Now, a Chinese duck oven is about the height of myself, probably like this wide, and it goes up to about 500 degrees centigrade, which your domestic oven would melt at that height. So because it doesn't get hot, we're using a pan. We just need to get the pan quite hot. Now be careful here. Again, because you've got all that marinade in, the important thing is that you don't need to season it. Don't season it. Okay, question. What oil do you use? Oil, just use that vegetable oil for this cooking. Use vegetable oil or rapeseed oil. Don't go and use all that expensive oil that you have in the back of your cupboard that was given to you for Christmas. Save that for something else, for salad. This is purely for cooking. So there, see that black? That is a good thing. The other question was, I'm diabetic, I can't have sugar. I probably wouldn't recommend this particular recipe if you can't have sugar, because the sugar is a very, very important part of the curing process. There are many, many other recipes that you can use. You can make, just probably not this one. Now, when you're cooking meat, I do recommend, again, if you can go through all this effort to make this recipe, why is there a meat thermometer? Now, basically what I want to do, I want to half cook this meat. So basically, when I say half cook, I want to get into like the equivalent of like a raw beef steak. Okay, so again, it's flattered. We're basically stimulating our barbecue. Don't be afraid of that flattening. And that flattening is also because there's a lot of sugar in the marinade. So you're expecting it to be flat. Okay, so that's half cooked now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it on the side. Leave it on the side there, but grab a section of that. Yes. Another question. So sorry about the extraction. It's only because we don't want the fire alarm to go off. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a marinade, a post-cooking marinade. Okay, so the temperature of the meat I'm cooking at right now, that's probably the equivalent of a raw, rare steak. So about 45 degrees, you're going to use the thermometer. Okay, so now I'm going to give you the recipe for some sugar syrup. So in this sugar syrup, we're going to have water and sugar. Okay, so we're going to start with that with equal quantities. Equal quantities. We're going to bring that up to the boil. We're going to dissolve the sugar first. One more trick, by the way, guys. If you guys have induction cookers at home, you should put a piece of parchment paper underneath and you never have to clean it. It's brilliant. I haven't got one today. So to the sugar syrup, I'm going to add a little bit of honey. Again, don't worry too much about recipe. Do it to flavour, right? If you like it a little bit sweeter, add a little bit extra sugar or extra honey. If you don't like it so sweet, don't put so much in. Right, to this, I'm going to add some oyster sauce. So this is premium oyster sauce from a company called Lee Kum Kee. I particularly like this one when it comes to oyster sauce, actually. I have no affiliation with it whatsoever. But Lee Kum Kee is a company that originated from making oyster sauce. There are a lot of other companies out there where oyster sauce isn't their prime business. They make other things, and then they make oyster sauce as a side project. So you put the oyster sauce in. Yes, we have a question. Okay, so can you do it on a barbecue? That is a question that's popping up by several people. Absolutely. By finishing on a barbecue, actually, it makes it, you're basically cooking it more like the original way, which is like a duck oven. A duck oven is basically a massive barbecue. Okay, to this, I've added some dark soy sauce. Okay, change our spoon over. If you, okay, question is that if you have a fish allergy, you can't use oyster sauce. You can buy vegetarian oyster sauce. You can use vegetarian oyster sauce, or alternatively, you could not put anything in. The most important part of this recipe is the sugar and water. You're basically creating a sweet liquid. So you're going to cook this until it's a little bit thicker than a sugar syrup you might use for a cocktail, for example. Another question's come in. What do you do with leftover marinade? In all honesty, you really haven't made very much, so throw it away. I wouldn't, anything that you've used already with meat inside it, I wouldn't recommend using it again. Okay, so this is now come together. It's still quite watery. I'll probably cook it a little bit, but you have to remember that as this cools, it will slightly thicken. So if you get it to the viscosity that you want, before it starts the cooling process, it will be too thick by the time it's ready. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like this, quite watery. I'm going to get my steak back. You see my pork neck there. So pork neck, I'm going to put that in. Oops. Into the syrup. Like so. And then, because it's only half cooked at the moment, I'm going to stick it under the salamander. So if you're doing this at home, you would probably stick this into your grill. So basically, what are we doing here? So what we're simulating here is there's a process that when traditional roasting chefs do, basically when it comes out of the duck oven or the barbecue, as some of you might use, when it comes out of the barbecue, they'll basically just throw it into the sugar syrup and leave it on the side. And then as the orders come in, what they'll do is they'll take it out of the syrup and they'll slice it to order and serve. So this is the process. So the only reason that we're half cooking it and then putting it in the grill with the syrup is because I don't want the meat to overcook. So this is one that I made earlier. As you can see from the syrup, as it cools, it thickens. If you guys can see that. Now remember, this is cooked. So this syrup afterwards, I'm going to use to put on top of my meat. So do not throw it away afterwards. How long do you want to cook that for? You want to get that pork. Officially, guidelines say 70 degrees, but actually, if you want a nice bit of succulent meat with still some moisture inside, you probably take it up to about 65. It's been sitting in the marinade for about half an hour. Okay, we have a question. What temperature is the grill? I honestly don't know. I wish I knew. This particular grill has one setting and one setting only, either on or off. But basically, you just want to cook it through. So we've got this piece of Char Siu now. And we're going to move it on to our board. I'll move on to this. So, you can see from this piece of pork, you can see here, it's got that nice char on the outside. Some roasting chefs in Hong Kong, they get very, very pedantic and they start trimming off all the little burnt bits. But actually, I really like the burnt bits, so I would never, ever chop them off. So it's been resting. While it's resting, I'm just going to talk you through, because traditionally what we serve this is we serve this with the honey, the marinade honey, or some people would put some fresh honey on top, some soy sauce, and the staple for this is rice. For rice, we have rice cooking here. Rice cooking here. So this is Thai jasmine rice. It's particularly my favorite to use in the restaurant. There was a point probably about a month ago when, because of stockpiling, there wasn't enough Thai jasmine rice in the country. At that point, instead of changing it to a basmati, actually, when you go to a shop, go and see if you can source Thai jasmine broken rice, because that is better than changing the rice to either a Japanese shiki rice, which is a little bit more glutinous, or basmati rice, which isn't glutinous at all, or any other like paella rice or whatever. It just something about Thai jasmine rice with Chinese food that to me is very important, and if you don't use it, it's not quite the same. We have a question. Okay, so we've had a question of alternative to the Juhao sauce. So soybean-based products, you can use anything. The point of that particular sauce is that it has a fermented flavor, it has a salty flavor, it has an umami flavor, and it has some sweetness in it. So, you could use a miso, or you can use, you go to Chinese supermarkets and they'll have other bean-based products. One is called sweet bean paste, or you can get certain sesame pastes. Or, as I said, if there's anything in particular you like, absolutely. Some people also sometimes with these recipes, some roasting chefs, they like to put fermented bean curd into it. Now, fermented bean curd is basically tofu, which has been fermented with chili and the end product, not only does it give it a red color, because it's naturally quite red, but it also, again, it gives it an additional hit of umami. So, back to the rice. So the rice here is 100% Thai jasmine rice. Now, some people who they don't like their rice to be really, really sticky, some people what they can do is that you can mix it 50-50 with long grain regular, I don't know, long grain non-Thai flavored rice. And what that will do is that it will stop the jasmine rice from sticking together as much. But for me, it's very important to have Thai jasmine rice. So this has been cooking now for 20 minutes. Again, don't cook Thai jasmine rice in a pan. A lot of people do it, and you know, sometimes you might see restaurants do it, but actually it's not ideal. Rice cookers are by far the best way of cooking rice, and they're not expensive. So it's been cooking now. I'm just going to fluff it up. Fluff up the rice. And now I'm just going to cover it up again. Right, I'm just going to cover it up, let it cook after we've loosened it up a little bit. So going back to our Char Siu now. So Char Siu now has been cooked. I'm just going to start slicing it up. Again, some chefs, they really like their Char Siu to be quite thick. I personally like it quite thin. Now, when I was talking about earlier on about a ham texture, this is what I want to show you. Okay? So you have a piece of roast meat. Normally, if you roast it and don't soak it back into a sugar syrup, it will just look like a medium rare steak. But here, it's almost got like a ham texture. Yeah, it's like a glaze. And for me, that is something that I really like about Char Siu. So this is the way that I prefer to cook it. And this kind of dish is perfect. As I said, if you've got a barbecue, this is absolutely perfect. But make sure, get the marinade right. Don't rush it onto the barbecue. The marination, always with a lot of Chinese cooking, the actual cooking, the last minute bit of cooking is the easiest part. The hardest part is the preparation. Whether it'll be dim sum, or it'll be making steamed buns, or it's making soya chicken, or it's making a Peking duck. The actual cooking is not the important bit, or the most important one is pulling noodles. So pulling noodles, the actual pulling is easy. The bit that everyone puts all over Instagram and puts all over YouTube, that's the easiest part. The hardest part of pulling noodles is getting your dough to the correct stage where you can begin to pull it. And this is another example of that. The marination process and the preparation of the meat is by far the most important part of this whole process. So here we have our meat. Just clear up a little bit. So you have the meat here, which I think has come out beautifully. If I look at the piece that's still been cooking, again, all it is just sitting in there. Now, if I check the temperature of the meat now, get a bit that's not sitting in the liquid. You can check the thermometer. That's gone up to 71, a little bit high. Okay, so we'll probably take this off. I would probably take this off and leave it on the side. Leave it on the side for maybe 20 minutes. So how are we going to serve this Char Siu? So, I'm going to get my sauce all over the top. Yeah, I'm sorry. If you're diabetic, it's probably not ideal. I'm really sorry. And remember, this isn't the kind of thing really that you eat. You wouldn't eat all this by yourself probably. This is very much a sharing kind of thing. And on the top of this, what I always like to add to it is I always like to add a little bit of soy sauce. Only because if not, it becomes very, very sweet. Here's your Char Siu. I'm going to get the rice. Again with your rice, I hate, one of my pet hates are people who like to put rice into bowls and then invert them onto plates. So you get like a massive bum sitting on a plate. It's like the most ridiculous thing in the world. And rice is meant to be loose. And it's meant to be airy. I do not understand why anyone would squash it onto a plate, and especially into a ridiculous shape. You know, rice should be natural. It should be loose, and it should be enjoyed loose. And what we have here, we have barbecue Char Siu with all the ingredients, with steamed jasmine rice, an absolute staple in Hong Kong. Roasting, it's an art that is 2,500 years old. So, you know, with most cooking, it's completely trial and error. You know, with 2,500 years worth of mistakes, this recipe really is one that has stood the test of time. I really hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please do ask. This is your time to ask. If not, you can email them to us, or you can ask me via DM on Instagram. The handle is A.Wong SW1. And yeah, the meat, as I said, pork neck, either get it from a butcher, or you can go to 3 Down Foods. You look them up, 3 Down Foods. I can't remember what their details are, but they do supply to your house or very, very high-end quality Iberico pork. And it does make the difference. It does make, if you use good pork, especially Iberico with the extra marbling inside, you will be able to taste it in your end product.